Amara pushed through the restaurant door so fast the hostess barely got out a greeting before she was already scanning the room. She knew this place. Tae-Hyun had brought her here a dozen times, always the same corner table, always the same waiter who called her by name. Tonight she'd come alone because Tae-Hyun told her he was flying out for an emergency meeting in Busan, and she didn't want to sit in her apartment thinking about how quiet it was going to be without him. Then she saw him. He was here, not in Busan, not on a plane. Sitting at their table, in a dark gray suit she'd helped him pick out, leaning across the white tablecloth toward someone whose face was turned away from her. Amara's feet stopped moving before her mind caught up with what her eyes were telling her. The someone across from Tae-Hyun laughed softly at something he said, and the sound of that laugh hit Amara like a hand closing around her throat, because she had heard that exact laugh her entire life. She had heard it in a hospital room when they were kids, and their mother was sick. She had heard it at graduations, at birthdays, through bedroom walls at 2 in the morning when neither of them could sleep. Amaya. Her sister turned her head just slightly, and in that motion Amara saw the small black box sitting open on the table between them. A ring, diamonds catching the low restaurant light. Amara didn't scream. She didn't drop anything, didn't gasp loud enough for the room to notice. She simply started walking, one foot in front of the other, past startled waiters and half-turned heads, until she was standing at the edge of the table that used to be hers. Tae-Hyun looked up first. Whatever color had been in his face drained out of it in an instant. Amaya's eyes lifted next, and when they found Amara's, she froze completely, like her whole body had forgotten how to move. Nobody spoke. The restaurant noise seemed to fall away, leaving only the three of them in a silence so complete that Amara could hear her own heartbeat. She looked at her sister, then at the man she had believed she was going to marry, then back at her sister. "How long has this been going on?" Her voice came out low, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Amaya's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her hands were shaking in her lap. Amara waited. 5 seconds, 10. She wasn't going to fill the silence for her. Then finally, one tear slid down Amara's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She simply looked at the two of them one last time, turned on her heel, and walked out of the restaurant without another word. Before this story goes any further, if you're the kind of person who needs to know how deep a betrayal can go before it destroys everything, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell, because this story is going to take you somewhere you won't see coming. Now, let's go back. 6 months before any of this happened, before a ring box ever sat on that table. Amara was 25. Amaya was 23. 2 years apart, never twins, though people mixed them up constantly when they were younger, back before their features settled into two very different women. Amara had their mother's steady eyes and quiet patience. Amaya had their father's restlessness, a hunger that never quite let her sit still. They grew up in the same small apartment in Incheon, sharing a room until Amara turned 18, trading secrets under blankets with a flashlight, covering for each other when their parents asked too many questions. When Amara got her heart broken for the first time at 16, it was Amaya who sat with her on the bathroom floor until 3 in the morning. When Amaya failed her university entrance exam the first time, it was Amara who quietly tutored her every night for 6 months until she passed. They loved each other. That much was never in question, not by Amara, not by anyone who knew them. But somewhere in all those years, something small had been growing in Amaya that she never spoke about. It didn't have a name yet. It didn't feel like anything worth mentioning. Their aunt once said, at a family dinner when Amara was accepted into a competitive graduate program, Amara was always going to be the one who made something of herself. She said it kindly. She meant it as a compliment to the whole family. Amaya smiled and raised her glass along with everyone else. Nobody noticed how tightly her fingers gripped the stem. A year later, when Amara was offered a junior position at one of Seoul's most respected design firms, their mother cried at the dinner table and held both of Amara's hands like she was afraid to let go. Amaya congratulated her sister with a hug that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. Then she excused herself to the kitchen to get more water and stood there for a moment longer than water required. None of it meant anything on its own. Sisters compare themselves to each other. It's what sisters do. Nobody in that family would have called it jealousy because it never looked like jealousy. It looked like pride. It looked like love. It was only later, much later, that anyone would understand what those quiet moments had actually been. Amara met Kang Tae-Hyun on a Tuesday evening that started completely ordinarily. She was overseeing renovations on a private club her firm had been contracted to redesign, standing in the middle of an unfinished lounge with blueprints in her hands, when a man in an unremarkable black coat walked in without an appointment and asked who was in charge. She didn't recognize him. She didn't know, not then, that most people in Seoul who saw that face went quiet and looked away. "I am," she said, not looking up from the blueprints. "And you can't be in here. This floor isn't cleared for foot traffic." "I own the building," he said. She finally looked up. "Then you should know better than to walk through wet concrete in leather shoes." Something shifted behind his eyes, surprise, maybe amusement, though his face didn't show much of either. Most people who spoke to Kang Tae-Hyun chose their words like they were diffusing something. This woman hadn't chosen her words at all. She just said what was true. He didn't tell her who he really was that day. Not the Mafia boss whose name made grown men lower their voices in restaurants, whose organization touched half the shipping contracts moving through the port of Incheon. To Amara, for the first several weeks, he was simply Tae-Hyun, quiet, precise, unreadable in a way that made her curious instead of cautious. They argued about the layout of the lounge. He wanted dark wood and low lighting. She wanted something that let people breathe. She won. He didn't seem to mind losing to her. He started finding reasons to be at the site. She started noticing when he wasn't. By the third month, dinner had become a habit neither of them acknowledged out loud. By the fourth, he had told her carefully. Watching her face the whole time, exactly who he was, and what his name meant to the people who feared it. Amara sat with that information for a long moment. Then she asked him, "Is that who you are with me?" "No," he said. "Then I don't need to know the rest," she told him, and meant it. That was the moment he started to trust her, really trust her. It was rare, and he knew it, and it terrified him a little, though he never said that part out loud either. He remembered small things about her, the way she took her coffee, the anniversary of her father's death, the fact that she hated when people finished her sentences for her. He listened when she talked, actually listened, in a way that made her feel like the only person in whatever room they were standing in. Amara told her sister everything, the way she always had. "He's different," she said one evening, curled up on Amaya's couch with a glass of wine neither of them had touched much of. "I know how it sounds. I know what people say about men like him, but he's not what people say." Amaya listened, chin resting on her knees, and asked all the right questions. "What does he look like? What does he sound like when he laughs? Does he make you feel safe?" "I do feel safe," Amara admitted, which is strange considering. Amaya smiled at that. It was a real smile. Whatever came later, that smile in that moment was real. A few weeks after that conversation, Amara brought Tae-Hyun to a family dinner for the first time. Amaya sat across from him, polite and warm, asking about his work in the vague way people ask questions they already suspect they won't get honest answers to. He answered carefully. She listened carefully. Nothing about that dinner would have struck anyone as unusual. Except, perhaps, the particular way Amaya's eyes lingered on him a beat too long when he spoke. A beat that meant nothing to anyone watching, including Amara, who was busy passing dishes and refilling glasses and being happy. It was only a beat. It passed. The dinner went on. Weeks later, Tae-Hyun mentioned, almost in passing, that Amaya had texted him a question about a gift idea for their mother's birthday. It seemed harmless. Sisters do that, reach out to the people their siblings love, build their own small connections. Amara thought nothing of it. The messages between Amaya and Tae-Hyun continued. At first they were exactly what they appeared to be, logistics, birthday planning, a shared joke about their mother's terrible taste in scented candles. Then, slowly, they became something else. Tae-Hyun mentioned once, without thinking much of it, that he didn't sleep well most nights. Amaya remembered that. She asked him about it the next time they spoke, and something about being remembered, about someone paying that kind of attention to a small, unimportant detail of his life, made him answer more honestly than he meant to. They talked again, and again. One evening, Amara walked into Amaya's apartment without knocking, the way she always had, and found her sister sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone held close to her chest. "Who was that?" Amara asked, dropping her bag by the door. "No one," Amaya said, sliding the phone into her pocket. "Work stuff." Amara didn't think anything of it. Why would she? It happened again a few weeks later. Amara walking in mid-conversation, Amaya's voice dropping, the phone disappearing before Amara could see the screen. A small, strange pattern that didn't mean anything on its own. Amaya knew what she was starting to feel long before she admitted it to anyone, including herself. She told herself it was harmless. She told herself it would pass, the way small crushes sometimes do, quietly and without consequence. It didn't pass. One night, after Amara had gone home early with a headache, Amaya and Tae-Hyun ended up alone at a quiet bar neither of them had planned to end up at. The conversation had started about nothing, his work, her frustration with a coworker, and somewhere in the middle of it, without deciding to, Amaya said the thing she'd been carrying for weeks. "I think about you more than I should." Tae-Hyun went very still. "Amaya." "I know," she said quickly. "I know exactly what you're going to say." "You're Amara's sister," he said, quiet but firm like a door closing. "I know that too," Amaya said, and for a moment, something in her face looked like it might actually let it go. It didn't. She could have walked away that night. She could have gone home, put distance between herself and whatever was building, let it fade the way feelings sometimes do when nothing feeds them. Instead, over the following weeks, she found reasons to see him. A question that could have been a text became a phone call. A phone call became a reason to meet in person, just for 10 minutes, just to talk something through. Tae-Hyun told himself each time that it was the last one. He told himself he was simply being kind to the sister of the woman he loved. He knew, somewhere underneath that story, that it wasn't true anymore, and he kept going anyway. Neither of them was forced into anything. Neither of them was tricked or manipulated by the other. They both understood exactly whose trust they were standing on top of, and they both chose, one small step at a time, to keep standing there. If this story has your stomach in knots already, wait until you see what happens when Amara starts noticing the cracks. Drop a comment right now with the number of the person you'd never forgive if they did this to you, a partner or a sibling. Because in a few minutes, you're going to have to decide for yourself. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because the truth is about to start unraveling. Amara noticed things the way people usually notice things, not all at once, but in small pieces that took time to add up. Tae-Hyun started seeming distracted during their dinners, his phone face down on the table in a way it hadn't used to be. He'd apologize, tell her it was business, and she believed him because she had no reason not to. Amaya started knowing things she shouldn't have. Once, at a family gathering, she mentioned offhand that Tae-Hyun didn't like ginger tea, a detail Amara hadn't remembered telling her. "How did you know that?" Amara asked, more curious than suspicious. "You must have mentioned it," Amaya said, and reached for the teapot before Amara could ask again. Small things. A conversation that stopped the moment Amara walked into the room. A look between Tae-Hyun and Amaya that lasted a half-second too long at a birthday dinner. Amaya turning defensive over questions that shouldn't have needed defending. Amara didn't accuse anyone. She questioned herself instead, the way people do when the alternative feels unthinkable. She wondered if she was working too much, imagining tension that wasn't there. She wondered if something was wrong with her relationship. Some flaw in herself that was making Tae-Hyun pull away. She never once wondered if her sister was the reason. That was the kind of trust Amaya was standing on. That was the kind of trust she chose to walk past. Then, one evening in early spring, Tae-Hyun took Amara to dinner and told her, in the quiet, careful way he told her important things, that he had been thinking about their future. Not vaguely. Specifically, he wanted to talk about marriage. Amara didn't sleep that night, not because she was afraid, but because she was happy in a way she hadn't let herself be in a long time. She called Amaya the next morning before she'd even had coffee. "He wants to talk about marriage," she said, laughing, half in disbelief. "Real marriage, a future." There was a pause on the other end of the line, brief enough that Amara didn't register it as strange. "That's wonderful," Amaya said. Her voice was warm. It sounded exactly like it should have sounded. "I'm so happy for you." When they saw each other in person a few days later, Amaya hugged her sister tightly, longer than usual, and Amara hugged her back without a single doubt in her mind. A week after that conversation, Amaya arranged to meet Tae-Hyun alone, in a part of the city neither of them frequented, where the chance of being recognized was low. "Are you really going to marry her?" Amaya asked him directly, no preamble, her voice steadier than she felt. Tae-Hyun didn't answer right away. He looked at her for a long moment, and whatever was in that silence, he didn't let it reach his face. "Amaya," he finally said and stopped there. She waited. He didn't finish the sentence. The silence between them said more than either of them was ready to admit out loud, and neither of them spoke about it again for weeks. But something had shifted. Whatever line still existed between what they had allowed themselves and what they hadn't, it was thinner now than either of them wanted to acknowledge. Tae-Hyun told Amara, 3 days later, that a sudden situation had come up in Busan, something urgent involving one of his business partners, and he needed to leave that evening for at least 2 days. Amara believed him. There was no reason yet not to. That night, missing him already, she decided to go to their restaurant alone, the quiet one with the corner table, just to sit somewhere that felt like him. She walked in and found the truth waiting for her instead. If you've ever had a moment where your whole world changed in the span of 5 seconds, you already know exactly what Amara felt standing in that doorway. Stay with this story, because what happens after that walkout is where everything really starts to break. And if this is hitting you as hard as it's hitting the rest of us, smash that like button before we go any further. Amara didn't answer Amaya's calls that night. She didn't answer Tae-Hyun's either. 17 missed calls between the two of them by morning, and she looked at every single one before turning her phone completely off. She sat alone in her apartment until the sun came up, replaying the image over and over. The ring box, her sister's face, the half-second where Amaya could have said something, anything, and chose silence instead. 3 days passed before Amara answered anyone. It was Amaya who finally showed up at her door, uninvited, eyes swollen from crying that had clearly been going on for longer than the past 3 days. "Please," Amaya said through the door, "please just let me explain." Amara opened the door, not because she was ready, but because she needed to look her sister in the eye and hear whatever she had to say. They stood in the small living room, several feet of distance between them that felt like miles. "Why?" Amara asked, just that, one word carrying the weight of everything. Amaya opened her mouth, and what came out wasn't a full explanation. It was fragments. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I tried to stop. I never wanted to hurt you," sentences that trailed off before they became anything real. "That's not an answer," Amara said quietly. "I don't have one that will make this okay," Amaya admitted, her voice breaking. "There isn't one." Amara nodded slowly, like she'd expected exactly that, and asked Amaya to leave. She didn't cry until the door was closed. In the weeks that followed, pieces of the past started surfacing in Amara's mind, unprompted, the way memory does when you're finally looking for patterns you never thought to look for before. She remembered their aunt's comment at that dinner years ago. Amara was always going to be the one who made something of herself, and the way Amaya's smile had looked, in hindsight, just slightly too fixed. She remembered the night she got the job offer at the design firm, her mother crying, Amaya excusing herself to the kitchen for water she didn't come back with for several minutes. She remembered 100 small moments she'd never once thought to question because questioning them had never occurred to her. Why would it? Amaya was her sister. Amaya loved her. She still did, probably. That was the part that made it so much harder to sit with. Amara went to see their mother, not to ask for answers, but because she needed somewhere safe to sit with the questions. Her mother, gently, without defending anyone, said something Amara turned over for days afterward. "Your sister has spent her whole life standing next to you," her mother said. "I don't think she ever learned how to stand in front of anything on her own." It wasn't an excuse. Amara knew that, and so did her mother. But it was the beginning of an answer to a question that had never had one before. Weeks later, when Amara finally agreed to speak with Amaya again, not to reconcile, but because she needed to say things out loud, her sister finally gave her something closer to the truth. "I used to watch you get chosen for things," Amaya said, sitting across from her at a small cafe neither of them had been to before, neutral ground. "Not because anyone was cruel to me. No one ever said I was less than you. I just always felt like I was standing in the space next to the person people actually saw." "That's not my fault," Amara said, not unkindly, just honestly. "I know," Amaya said. "I've never once thought it was your fault. That's what makes it so much worse. I did this to someone who never did anything to me." "Then why him?" Amara said, her voice finally breaking for the first time since the restaurant. "Out of everyone in this world, why did it have to be him?" Amaya was quiet for a long moment. "Because for the first time in my life, someone chose me first," she finally said. "And I knew exactly what that would cost. I chose it anyway." The honesty of it didn't make it easier to hear. If anything, it made it harder, because now there was nothing left to misunderstand. Amara stood up from the table. "I could have survived losing him," she said, looking down at her sister. Her voice steady even though her hands weren't. "I don't know if I'll ever survive knowing that you understood exactly how much this would hurt me, and you did it anyway." Amaya's face crumpled completely. Not because she'd lost Tae-Hyun's affection, and not because she'd been caught. Because for the first time, she truly understood the size of what she had done, and there was no version of an apology large enough to reach it. Amara left the cafe without waiting for a response. There wasn't one that could have changed anything. She confronted Tae-Hyun a few days after that, in the quiet office where she'd first met him, standing in a space that used to feel safe. "You knew who she was to me," Amara said. "You didn't stumble into this. You made a choice, over and over, every single time you answered one of her messages instead of ending it, the first time she said something you should have shut down immediately." "I know," he said. He didn't try to defend himself. He'd had weeks to prepare an explanation and found, standing in front of her, that none of them held up. "I'm not going to tell you it wasn't real for me at some point because I'd be lying to you again, and I've already done enough of that. But I knew exactly what I was risking. I chose to keep going anyway. That's on me, not just on her." "I'm not asking you to blame her more than yourself," Amara said. "I'm asking you to actually understand what you did, not explain it, understand it." He nodded slowly, and for the first time since she'd known him, Kang Tae-Hyun, a man feared by half the city, looked like he genuinely didn't know what to say. "I'm not coming back," Amara told him. "Not now, maybe not ever. I need you to understand that isn't a door I'm leaving open out of anger. It's a door I'm closing because I finally understand what was actually behind it." He didn't argue. He knew, somewhere underneath everything, that arguing wasn't something he'd earned the right to do anymore. "Before we get to how this all ends, if you've made it this far, you already know this story isn't the kind that wraps up in a neat little bow. And that's exactly why it's worth sticking around for. Comment below if you think Amara should ever forgive her sister, and hit subscribe if you want more stories like this one, because the ending is coming, and it's not the one you're expecting. Months passed. Amara didn't disappear from her family, but she pulled back from the parts of it that touched Amaya directly, attending gatherings only when she knew her sister wouldn't be there, keeping their mother updated through careful, distant phone calls instead of the easy visits they used to share. She threw herself into her work at the firm, taking on a project that required her to travel for 6 weeks, partly because the opportunity was real, and partly because distance, for a while, was the only thing that made the days feel survivable. Tae-Hyun didn't try to force his way back into her life. He sent one message, weeks after their last conversation, that said simply, "I understand if this is the end. I'm not going to pretend I deserve anything else. I just wanted you to know that what I felt for you was real, even if I ruined every reason you had to believe that." Amara read it twice. She didn't respond, not because she didn't believe him, but because believing him didn't change what he'd done. Amaya, for her part, didn't try to force forgiveness either. She'd learned, in the ugliest possible way, that trust wasn't something you could apologize your way back into. She started going to therapy, quietly, without telling anyone in the family except their mother, working through the parts of herself that had let this happen in the first place, not to earn Amara's forgiveness, but because she finally understood she needed to, regardless of whether forgiveness ever came. Half a year after the night in the restaurant, Amara agreed to have coffee with her sister for the first time since the cafe conversation that had ended everything between them. They sat across from each other, both a little older in the ways that only pain ages a person, both a little more careful with their words. "I'm not asking you to trust me again," Amaya said. "I know that's not something I get to ask for. I just wanted you to know I'm not the same person who sat at that table with him. I'm not saying that to make myself feel better. I'm saying it because it's true, and because you deserve to know it, even if it doesn't change anything between us." Amara studied her sister for a long moment, the same eyes she'd grown up next to, the same face that used to feel like the safest place in the world. "I don't know what we are anymore," Amara said honestly. "I don't think either of us knows yet, but I don't hate you. I want you to know that too. I just don't know how to be close to you the way I used to be. Maybe that comes back someday. Maybe it doesn't. I can't promise you an answer I don't have." "That's more than I thought I'd get," Amaya said quietly. "It's not forgiveness," Amara said. "Not yet, maybe not for a long time." "I know," Amaya said. "I'm not going anywhere, though. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." They didn't hug when they left. They didn't promise to call each other the next week. But something small had shifted. Some door that had been completely shut now left open just slightly, not enough to walk through yet, but enough to remember that it existed. That evening, Amara's phone buzzed with a message from her sister. "I am sorry, not because I got caught, because of who I chose to become for a little while and what it cost you. I don't expect that to fix anything. I just needed you to know I mean it." Amara read the message twice, sitting alone in her apartment with the city lights spread out beneath her window. She didn't respond right away. She set the phone face down on the table beside her and sat with everything the last 6 months had taken from her, and everything, slowly, she was beginning to build back. She thought about Tae-Hyun sometimes, in quiet moments she didn't choose. She thought about what they might have been in a version of this story where trust had never been broken. She didn't know if that door would ever open again either. For now, it didn't need to. She thought about her sister more, though, because that wound went deeper, into places a romantic relationship never could have reached. Sisters were supposed to be the one certainty, the one relationship that didn't require constant proof. Amaya had taken that certainty and shown Amara exactly how fragile it had always been. But certainty and love weren't the same thing, Amara was learning. She could still love her sister, even without the certainty. She could hold both the hurt and the hope in the same hands, without pretending either one canceled out the other. Healing, she realized, wasn't a single moment where everything suddenly made sense again. It was 100 small choices, made slowly over time, choosing to answer a phone call, choosing not to, choosing to sit across a table from the person who hurt you and see if anything honest was still possible between you. She didn't know yet what her future with her sister would look like. She didn't know if Tae-Hyun would ever be more than a name that used to mean something. She only knew that she had walked out of that restaurant with her dignity intact, and that whatever came next, she would build it standing on her own feet. Forgiveness, if it ever came, wouldn't erase what had happened. It would simply mean she'd found a way to carry it without letting it define everything that came after. Some nights she still thought about the ring box, sitting open on that white tablecloth, and the version of her future that had shattered the second she saw it. But most nights now, she thought instead about the quiet strength it had taken to turn around and walk away without a single word, and how that same strength was what would carry her forward, one day at a time, into whatever came next. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with us while writing it, let us know in the comments what part hit you the hardest. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next one, because there are more stories like Amara's coming, stories about betrayal, about the people who survive it, and about what it actually takes to build something honest out of the wreckage. Thank you for staying until the very end.